As medical school applicants, obviously we're held to really high academic standards, but that is not the only thing that matters. Having a good GPA or a high MCAT score doesn't necessarily mean you'll go on to become a good doctor, and in my experience, medical schools are becoming more and more aware of this. So, how do schools differentiate between the people who are just really smart and the people who will actually make good doctors? Well, one of the key ways that they do this is through your letters of recommendation. So, if you're a student like me and you didn't have a perfect GPA and you also didn't have a perfect MCAT score, then your letters of recommendation are going to be one of the most powerful ways that you can show medical schools who you really are and why you would make a good physician. For this series, I want to start by talking about who to ask for med school letters of recommendation. First things first, once you've got a general idea of the schools that you're interested in, go on the websites for each one and look at their specific guidelines. This is an area where I found some schools differ from each other, so it's important to know the requirements for each school that you're applying to. Most schools are going to have at least one or two specific criteria for the people that they expect to hear from in your letters, and these could include science professors, non-science professors, and if you did undergraduate research, your PI. Alright, so as far as determining which professors count as science and which don't, the AAMC actually has a really great guide that categorizes everything for you. I'll link it in the description. I would highly recommend you take a look at this before you start talking to your professors because some of the classifications may actually surprise you. For example, when I was applying, I found out that statistics counts as a science class, whereas psychology typically doesn't. And that was kind of surprising to me, so just make sure you take a look at that first. When it comes to picking which professors you want to ask for recommendations, the general rule of thumb is to just go with people that you know. The last thing you want is to be in a situation where you show up at your professor's office and you're like, "Hello, thank you so much for teaching this really awesome class. I loved it so much. Would you please write a recommendation for me?" And then your professor is just sitting over here like, "Who are you again?" That would be terrible. So my best advice for avoiding that type of situation is to go to your professor's office hours. Not only do I think this is one of the best resources for your overall academic success, but it is also the easiest way for professors to get to know you, okay? The key here is FaceTime, okay? They do not have to know your entire life story right now, because more than likely, if they do agree to write you a recommendation, then you'll have an opportunity later on to set up a meeting with them, to go over, who you are as an applicant and what your overall goals are, so don't worry about that. For now, just focus on getting them to the point where they recognize your face. Now, more than likely, you're not going to have this cosmic connection with every single professor whose office hours you go to, and that's fine. But honestly, if you do this for enough of your classes, odds are you'll find at least one or two professors that you really vibe with. And that could just be because you really like their teaching style, or you thought their class was really interesting, or it could be that they're just less intimidating than your other professors. That's what happened with me. I just ended up asking professors that I felt the most comfortable around. So once you figure out who those professors are, keep going to their office hours. Spend as much time there as your schedule will allow you to. Also, don't just kind of show up and sit there on the sidelines. Try to come up with questions ahead of time so that you can be an active part of the conversation. You want to show your professor that you are fully present, you are engaged, and you're interested in being there. Okay, so you figured out which professors you're going to ask. Now you have to focus on your character references. These are typically from people who have supervised you in an environment outside of the typical classroom setting. Listen to me when I say this. Do not underestimate the value of these types of letters. When schools are looking at your application as a whole, they're already going to have a pretty good idea of your academic performance based on your transcripts. So all they really need to round that out is just a couple of letters from your professors talking about your performance in their classes. Beyond that, figuring out who you are as a student is relatively easy for the admissions committee. But the real challenge they're going to be facing is, who are you as a person? They want to know, are you going to be patient? Are you going to be understanding? Will you respect people in general? These are the types of questions that they need you to answer with your character references. So I would say pick people like supervisors from your part-time job or summer job, someone who supervised you in your volunteer experience, or maybe a doctor that you shadowed in a clinic. Any of these would be really good options for this type of letter. To give an example from my application, I asked my supervisor at my part-time job to write one of these letters for me. And the reason I chose her specifically was because she was uniquely qualified to talk about my customer service skills. And personally, I think customer service is one of those things that's really relevant to being a good doctor, but it's highly underrated. So my supervisor was able to answer questions like, what do I do when a customer comes in asking a question that I don't know how to answer? Or how do I respond when a customer isn't being particularly polite to me? These are situations that I am absolutely, for sure, 100% going to be put in as a doctor. So committees are going to want to know how I'm going to handle them. If you're still stumped on who to ask for these types of letters, I would recommend looking at the AAMC's guidelines for writing a letter of evaluation. It's basically this whole list of qualities that committees are looking for in their applicants, and it definitely helped spark a few ideas for me on who I could ask for these types of letters. Bottom line, just work on building strong relationships with the people around you. And also try to think of a few people outside of your academic life who can give admissions committees a totally different perspective on who you are as an applicant. Alright, that's all I've got for who to ask for letters of recommendation. Next time, I'm going to talk more about when and how to ask for those recommendations. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.